We are on week 2 of a brand new series of talks that will take us right the way up until Christmas on the book of Nehemiah. And Dave Stroud brilliantly kicked us off last week looking at chapter 1. Today we're going to look at chapter 2. Before we do that, though, I want to start by looking at the wider narrative of which Nehemiah is a part, the wider context, and then draw a parallel with where I think we're at on our journey as a church as well. So let's rewind to the year 586 BC. Jerusalem has been destroyed, and the vast majority of Jewish people are carried off into captivity and exile in Babylon. Babylonia is the world superpower at this point in history, and all that's left behind in Jerusalem really is a fairly impoverished, destitute bunch of people. Babylonia remains the world superpower for several decades, but then the Persian Empire begins to come to the fore. Persia becomes the new world superpower. And in 539 BC, Cyrus the Great conquers even Babylon itself. And for those of you who care about things like this era spans the life of a guy called Daniel, who you can read about in the Old Testament, the waning of one world superpower and the emergence of another. Shortly after Cyrus the Great comes to the throne, the first wave of Jewish exiles return back to Jerusalem under the leadership of a guy called Zerubbabel. And the first thing he gets them doing is to rebuild the temple, the center of their worship of God. Now, ordinarily, that shouldn't take very long at all, maximum a couple of years. In reality, the temple isn't completed for over 20 years. 516 BC, the temple is finally completed. And the main reason it took so long was simply because of fear and insecurity and disappointment and disillusionment on behalf of the Jewish people. It kind of highlights what a fragile people group they were at this point in history. That continues for many decades, further highlighted around about 479 BC, when the Jew Esther becomes queen of the Persian Empire. And amongst other things, she saves the Jews from a genocide attempt on their lives. Again, just further highlighting their vulnerability. 15 years later, a guy called Artaxerxes comes to the throne. He's now the new ruler of the whole of the Persian Empire. And shortly after he comes to the throne, the second wave of Jews return back to Jerusalem, this time under the leadership of a guy called Ezra. And amongst other things, they have a failed attempt to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Fast forward well over a decade, and we get to the life of a guy called Nehemiah. Now, Nehemiah is an important official in the Persian government. We're told that he is a cupbearer to King Artaxerxes. Now, that was very probably more than simply the guy that poured the wine. In fact, one ancient historical source described the cupbearer as second in command in the whole kingdom. Now, we don't know if that's the position that Nehemiah had, but almost definitely it was a very significant role to serve King Artaxerxes. But he gets the news that things in Jerusalem are not going well. The walls are still broken down. The gates have been destroyed by fire. We read in chapter 1 and verse 3 that the people there are in great trouble and disgrace. Literally means in the Hebrew they are greatly distressed. And Nehemiah gets it in his heart that he wants to do something about that. He wants to see the walls rebuilt. He wants to see the city restored to its former glory. He wants to see the people no longer in disgrace. That's his great dream. That's his great ambition. That's his great plan. And that's a lot about what the book of Nehemiah is all about. And we're about to pick up the story in chapter 2 where Nehemiah goes to Artaxerxes with this great plan. But I want to draw a parallel with where we are at as a church right now. Because one of the reasons we thought we should go through the book of Nehemiah this term is that in many ways we feel like we're in a wall building phase at this point in our journey. There are some walls to be built here. We've talked a lot over the last couple of years about what we feel we're about and we want to be about as a church. And if I had to simplify it as much as I possibly could, it would be this, that we want to do an outstanding job of making disciples. But the New Testament says Jesus is actually the one that builds the church. Matthew chapter 28, our Great Commission is to go and make disciples. We want to help every single person work out what is the world that I'm passionate about. What is the world that maybe I'm called to? If not that, what is the world where I found myself right now? And how can I personally contribute to that world's flourishing? How can I make a difference there? How can I follow Jesus as best as I possibly can in that particular world. Many of you may have noticed that we have both life groups and connect groups in the life of Christ Church right now. And justifiably, you might ask, well, what's the difference between the two? If I had to put it really simply, it would be this. A connect group is a community of people that wants to contribute to the flourishing of the same world. They want to follow Jesus as outstandingly as they possibly can with the same goal in mind. Maybe that's I want to see a particular part of London flourish, like South Central communities. Maybe it's I want to see a particular workplace flourish or a particular people group flourish. I want to serve Jesus as outstandingly as I possibly can in the world of students and give my energies there. A life group simply draws people from different worlds, maybe also people who haven't worked out what's the world that I'm passionate about or called to right yet. But the heart as they gather together is still the same. We want to do an outstanding job of helping people follow Jesus, of helping to make disciples. And just to earth this and detail this in a number of different ways that we're doing this as a church right now, this time next week, I'm going to be interviewing on stage a guy called Rich Hillier, who's about to start a connect group next month for city workers. A little part of London with long working hours, stressful deadlines, some philosophical and ethical questions around things like finance. A lot of stuff to work through about how can Christians in that world contribute to that particular part of London's flourishing, and in due course maybe the city and the nation as well. Who knows what that connect group might spawn? Workplace ministry, coaching seminars, training sessions. That's just one little part of London, one connect group. We are praying for scores. It's been brilliant hearing of people in the creative professions begin to come together and talk about how can we contribute to the flourishing of those worlds. We've recently had our 7th creative writing workshop. It was a joy earlier this year to go along and see many of you at Jo Reese's, or her author's name, Jo Rossiter's book launch near Marylebone. Just a way of supporting one person who's part of this church family as they seek to follow Jesus in that particular part of London life. Next month, we have our next Good Ideas Pitch Night, where entrepreneurs want to take their creative ideas to the next stage of development. You can go along and hear people pitch their dream, their business idea, their product plan, and see if you've got the skills to help it one step closer to reality. There's masses of scope for that to grow. In the East London Connect group right now, there are a small group of people beginning to meet together to chat about how they can contribute to the flourishing of the music industry. We're increasingly seeing actors in our midst. How do we serve them as they seek to follow Jesus outstandingly in that world full of very significant challenges? What about journalists or architects or those in advertising? The East London Connect group is looking to see that part of London flourish. You may well be aware, a couple of months ago ran an Imago Dei market in Spitalfields, kind of a market with a social conscience where every product they sell would seek to benefit the life of somebody either locally or internationally. It's an amazing success, working alongside people who wouldn't say they've got any faith right now, but contributing to the flourishing of this city as a result. Of course, increasingly it's our heart that as a church we care for the disadvantaged. Right now we are heavily supporting the Refugee Support Network as we look to mentor people who've come to this city and this nation, often from very challenging backgrounds. As you've seen earlier, we teach football skills to teenagers. We help provide food for those who can't afford to feed themselves for an average week through our Vauxhall Food Bank project. That's just a photo of me mopping the floors at Food Bank, one of the only photos I could find, so I had to put it into the presentation. It's been really exciting hearing over 60 Christchurch volunteers who are part of the night shelter in Tower Hamlets, part of the Growth charity, who are helping people find more permanent accommodation if they don't have it. Chatting to a couple of ladies recently who feel part of the world that they want to contribute to is the homeless community in London, asking is it possible to get a house where we could house some people. A couple of other girls I was chatting to who feel the world that they want to contribute to is the world of teenagers in London and are now looking to get involved in youth clubs in their local community. We want to celebrate what the Isle of Dogs or Island Gardens Life Group has been up to. A group of people who are meeting together regularly saying, how can we change this particular part of London? And there's a park just round the corner from where they meet, which over the years had become a haven for gangs to gather and frequent drug use. And families and the community had stopped using it as a result. So they began to ask the question, how can we contribute to the flourishing of this little corner of the capital? And they chatted with Christians from other churches, working with London City Mission, who we're big fans of here at Christ Church, and they decided to set up a cafe in that park. Ever since they have done that, the gangs have vanished. I guess they're meeting elsewhere. Drug use, I'm told, has effectively stopped in that park. And best of all, Families and the local community are beginning to use the park again. It has been redeemed by disciples of Jesus for what it was originally intended for. We want to celebrate that. I love it that we're increasingly passionate about reaching the nations. 2 years ago on this stage, we prayed for Reese and Sarah Scott as they went off to Vancouver in Canada to start a brand new church from scratch. A few years before that, we prayed on stage for Josie and Justin Pride as they were part of a team that started a brand new church in Dublin, in Ireland. Next year, we'll be praying Joel Kendall out of this church as he goes to Istanbul in Turkey. We've been after that for a long time, many of us. We're really excited by what's going to happen there. Add to that the scores of people, many of whom are in this room right now, who've gone overseas to strengthen mission organizations and tackle global poverty. I love it that increasingly we're becoming diverse as a church and looking to serve the nations on our doorstep. We are right behind the Connect group that's looking to serve the 2,000-strong Mongolian community in central London. They're seeing some really great stuff happen. We'll profile that in a few weeks' time. We are massive fans of the Global Students Connect group, who feel part of what they want to contribute to is internationals in London who arrive essentially maybe not knowing a single person and saying, how can we serve them? And they've run homework clubs, they've practiced hospitality, and they have seen some amazing stories of people who have come to this nation not knowing anyone and gone back home with their lives completely changed. We'll profile that in a short while as well. We've not long launched a pastoral support team, small group of people who feel what they are wired for partly is to bind up the brokenhearted, comfort those who are grieving, and to help people get free of patterns of behavior that are robbing them of a full and a free life. We're beginning to talk about what could we do in 2014 to help people who are wrestling with persistent fears or other identity issues they might be wrestling with right now. And there's our marriage and families ministry. We would love this church to be a place that refreshes and strengthens and heals marriages, that we become a model for what married life can be. There's a growing children's ministry in Christchurch right now. We want to invest in the generations that are coming beyond us. In fact, that is the fastest growing area of church life right now, mainly because you lot keep procreating and producing babies. 3 more babies in the last week. We want to serve them well and help them know there's a whole community that is for them. We're running our first parenting workshop later on this term. 6-week course, sold out almost instantaneously. I hope that is the first of many such courses that we run here that serve people both in this room and outside of it as well, in community after community across London. Next Sunday is the next meeting for the Fostering and Adoption Support Group, people who feel they're passionate about that particular aspect of London life. Then there's the Families Connect group in South West London, little corner of the capital, saying how can we contribute to see that aspect of life flourish in the capital. My prayer is that many mums and dads and children find their homes and relationships nourished and changed because of that group of disciples' presence in that particular part of London. I was chatting with Dan and Lou Richards recently, who lead that group, dreaming of what could we do later on this term. We were talking about maybe we could run a Santa's Grotto and give out gifts to children in the local community. And whether or not that happens, the point that I am trying to make in a number of different ways is that it is our conviction that following Jesus is about way more than simply attending a meeting on a Sunday or a midweek group. It is a way of life, and it should transform every single thing we put our hand to. And of course, our heart in all of this is not just that we do an outstanding job of making disciples, but better than that, we make disciples who make disciples. I don't think there is anything greater in life than helping somebody into the relationship that I think they were made for with Jesus Christ. We want to see our Central Alpha course go from strength to strength. Pictures from the last launch earlier this year on the screen behind me. Do bring your friends along to the 2 launches we're running in October. What an amazing opportunity to help people explore questions of faith. But we also recognise that not everyone can make it into central London on a Tuesday evening. I want to commend Ange Catlett, who's part of the North London Connect group, wants to see that part of London flourish. She's run an Alpha course recently for mums in the local community who have no time or inclination to come into central London on a weekday evening. She's seen a number of people find faith in the last few months and has helped them into churches in the local area. Students in East London and London Bridge have run other Alpha courses with similar success. Maybe part of what your world and how you can bring flourishing to your community over this next year or your workplace is to start an Alpha course where you are. And of course, in all of this, we want to see what we're doing here on Sundays go from strength to strength. Wouldn't it be amazing if we made so many disciples here that we couldn't fit everybody into 2 meetings and we had to start a third one? But as we encourage everybody to work out what their own world is and how they can see that flourish, we recognise that corporately we want to see London flourish as a result. But to see London flourish, as well as people coming to us, we need to go to them as well. Earlier this year we talked about on our hearts to do multi-site church in the future. And 450 of you kindly texted in your postcodes from where you live in London. These are the results on the screen behind me. The red dots are where you're all coming from. And the bigger dots are ones that I've superimposed on the map to show you where approximate clusters of community are gathering at this point in time. Wouldn't it be amazing? Wouldn't it be amazing if over the next 5 to 10 years we saw reflections of Christchurch other sites in North and East and South Central and South West London, maybe even more? And we're praying, God, how can we follow Jesus as best as we possibly can? How can we make a difference as we pray this through? Don't know where to start yet, when to do it, how to do it, who to do it with. But the point I'm making in a number of different ways is this. We've got some walls to build here. And we wondered whether you'd join us in helping to make it happen. And as we're about to read Nehemiah chapter 2, as he goes to the king with his great plan, the king says, yes, go and do it. He then goes to Jerusalem and he calls the people, will you build this city with us? That's simply what we want to ask you to do today. Will you build with us here? So if you've got a Bible, please turn to Nehemiah chapter 2. And if you've not got one, I hear an absence of rustling in the room. Shame on you. The words are going to be on the screen behind me. There we go. It's quite a long chapter. We're going to read all of it because it'll help you get the arc of the story at this particular point in the narrative. Nehemiah 2, 1 through to 20. Here we go. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before, so the king asked me, why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart. I was very much afraid, but I said to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my fathers are buried lies in ruins, and its gates have been destroyed by fire? The king said to me, what is it you want? Then I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my fathers are buried, so that I can rebuild it. Then the king, with the queen sitting beside him, asked me, how long will your journey take, and when will you get back? It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. I also said to him, if it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of Trans-Euphrates, so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah. And may I have a letter to Asaph, keeper of the king's forest, so he will give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel by the temple, and for the city wall, and for the residence I will occupy. And because the gracious hand of my God was upon me, the king granted my requests. So I went to the governors of Trans-Euphrates and gave them the king's letters. The king had also sent army officers and cavalry with me. When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard about this, they were very much disturbed that someone had come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days, I set out during the night with a few men. I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts with me except the one I was riding on. By night I went out through the valley gate towards the Jackal Well and the Dung Gate, examining the walls of Jerusalem, which had been broken down, and its gates, which had been destroyed by fire. Then I moved on towards the Fountain Gate and the King's Pool, but there was not enough room for my mount to get through. So I went up the valley by night, examining the wall. Finally I turned back and re-entered through the valley gate. The officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing, because as yet I had said nothing to the Jews or the priests or nobles or officials or any others who would be doing the work. Then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. I also told them about the gracious hand of my God upon me and what the king had said to me. They replied, let us start rebuilding. So they began this good work. But when Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite official, and Geshem the Arab heard about it, they mocked and ridiculed us. What is this you are doing, they asked. Are you rebelling against the king? I answered them by saying, the God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it. So Nehemiah chapter 2. And what I want to do today is not very profound at all. I'm not sure you're going to get any insights into the text that you've not had before. But simply we want to ask you, would you come and help us build some walls here? would you come and help us build something that changes people's lives, that wins the hearts of people, and that refreshes and nourishes this city? Will you help us build some walls here? I find it interesting that the first thing that Nehemiah has to call the people to is to snap out of their own kind of insecurities and fears, to overcome any sense that, oh, can we really do this? I mean, this is a pathetic group of people on the fringes of a vast empire, and they are looking back at over a century of seeming failure, exile, estrangement from God, genocide attempts. And not only that, but they're in a city with broken down walls, open to enemy attack, robbery, pillaging, verbal abuse. I find it interesting that the moment these weak group of people say, okay, let's give this building thing a go, you've got a whole people, 3 men, just 3 men, start mocking and ridiculing them. I know you know this, but you mock and you ridicule that which you think is weaker than you are. We have this sense of this weak people who failed at building attempts in the past, who lack any sense of self-confidence and identity as a people, feel far from God. Nehemiah says to them, will you snap out of that state and let's build something great together? I wonder very, very carefully, there's a couple of things in your brown envelopes. If you take out from your brown envelopes the first of my new academic year gifts to you, which is a small red paperclip. No need to thank me. I'm generous, I know. Happy new academic year. Ah, the rustling of paper. Normally during my sermons it's sweets. Today it's a red paperclip. Now this is a story some of you may have heard of. It's about a guy called Kyle MacDonald. Kyle MacDonald was based in the United States, and to quote him, not me, he said, I was stuck in a dead-end job, probably slipping into depression, feeling like my life was going nowhere. And one day he just started twiddling this red paperclip that was on the desk in front of him. Waves and waves of purposelessness washing over him, thinking, what is my life all about? And this crazy idea came into his head, I want to try and swap this red paperclip for my very own house. So he went onto the internet and he advertised this red paperclip saying, this is what I want to do. Would anyone trade me anything for this red paperclip? Very shortly afterwards, a couple of girls called Ronnie and Corinna got in touch and said, well, we've got a pen shaped like a fish. We don't really want that anymore. We'll swap that for your red paperclip. Kyle MacDonald said, deal. So he now owns a pen shaped like a fish. He advertises that online. A girl called Annie Robbins gets in touch, says, I'd quite like a new pen actually. I've got this doorknob that looks a bit like E.T. I don't want that anymore. I'll swap that. So now Kyle MacDonald owns a doorknob that looks a bit like E.T. Advertises that online. A guy called Sean Sparks gets in touch. He needed a quirky doorknob for something, so he traded the doorknob for an old Coleman stove that he didn't want anymore. He advertised that online, did old Kyle. And a guy called Sergeant David J got in touch and swapped it for an electric generator. He advertised the electric generator online. A guy called Marcin got in touch, swapped that for a neon Budweiser sign and a beer keg. When he advertised that, a guy called Michael Barrett got in touch, said, I want that. I'll trade that for a snowmobile that I don't want anymore. He swapped the snowmobile for an all-expenses-paid trip to Yak in British Columbia. He swapped that for a large cube van. The large cube van was traded for a recording contract. He traded the recording contract for a year's worth of free rent in Phoenix. So that's what Kyle MacDonald owns now, a year's worth of free rent in Phoenix. Advertises that, someone gets in touch, says, I'll swap that for an afternoon with rock celebrity Alice Cooper. He trades the afternoon with Alice Cooper for a very rare Kiss snow globe. That might sound like a curious trade, but a guy called Corbin Benson got in touch who collected rare snow globes. And he swapped that for a part in a movie. 14 trades after Kyle MacDonald sat twiddling that paperclip thinking, what is my life all about? He swapped that part in a movie for his very own house on a road called Main Street in a town called Saskatchewan. Here's his house, complete with giant model of red paperclip outside, and at the bottom you can see the 14 people involved in the trades along the way. Now I know that's a quirky story, but what Kyle MacDonald would say would be this, that he could have simply sat around feeling sorry for himself, waves of depression rolling over him. Or he could have asked the question, what can I do with what I've got right now, pathetic as it might seem? And at the end of his blog, where he lists all of that in much more detail, he asks this question, what's your red paperclip? You know, maybe you don't feel like you have a call to anything or a passion for anything right now. I simply ask you, well, what world are you in right now? Where do you live? Where do you work? Who are the people that are in your life right now? What can you do with that? If you look hard, you will find a million opportunities to become a better disciple in the world that you are in right now. Maybe like this pathetic bunch of people in Jerusalem, you feel like all I've got is this one red paperclip. Maybe part of your call this year is to trade that pathetic red paperclip for a pen shaped like a fish. But if we all do that, I wonder, if many of us in due course, if we try and take little step after little step, we'll see all our wildest dreams in God come true because we're faithful with what we've got. Joy and I have been asking this question, how can we become better disciples in the world that we're in? Got chatting to our neighbour a few weeks ago, and we just decided to ask a few more questions than we ordinarily would. Rather than small talk, let's go a bit deeper. And our neighbour Jerry just began to open up. She said, actually, right now I'm feeling really stressed. There's a problem with my eye. It seems like the retina's becoming detached. Doctors have no idea what the problem is or how they can solve it. I'm very likely to go blind. That's a stress for us as a married couple because my husband isn't allowed to drive because of a medical condition, which means our lives are going to change forever. We're really scared. And my wife Joy, who's a better disciple than me, said, can we pray for you? She said, I'd love you to pray for me. So we prayed for her. Got back from holiday a couple of weeks ago, bumped into her. Hey, Jerry, how you doing? How's your eye? She said, Andy, it's amazing. I went to the doctors. They suddenly worked out what the problem is. They can fix it. I'm not going to lose my sight. Now, did Jesus heal her eye? I don't know. But I do know this, that in a teeny tiny, seemingly pathetic way, Joy and I became better disciples. We gave our red paperclip. We got back a fish pen. What about you? What would make you a better disciple? Maybe you can make the most of your workplace and go in with a different attitude tomorrow morning. Maybe you can serve your local community. Maybe there's particular people in your life whose lives you can refresh right now. If you look hard, you'll find a whole load of opportunities. Jesus put it like this: if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. And if you tip your brown envelopes upside down, my other new academic year gift to you is a teeny tiny mustard seed. Just pour it into your hand. Just look at how small it is. Just play with it in your hand for a moment. If you've dropped it on the floor and it's fallen out already, just do this with your hand. Everyone will think you've still got it. You know what? I've not... Calm down. It's just a seed. Now, Jesus says this. If you want to see a mountain move, you don't need to be a leader with loads of leadership responsibility. You don't have to be a great man or woman of faith. You need something as teeny and tiny and insignificant as what is in many of your hands right now. Teeny tiny mustard seeds can move mountains. You know, maybe you think you've not got much to give. Maybe you're feeling a bit blue about where your life is headed. You need to know that communities can change because somebody sets up a cafe in a park. Families can change because someone decides to forgive rather than hold a grudge. Workplaces can change because someone decides to serve their colleagues rather than trampling on others to get ahead. Martin Luther King, who Dave quoted ad nauseam last Sunday, he used up every single one of Martin Luther King's quotes, apart from this one. Faith is taking the first step even when you don't see the whole staircase. You know, I have no idea what the future has in store for us as a church. Where's our first site going to be? I don't know. What ministries will we start? I don't know. But I do know this, that if we take the first step together, then some incredibly exciting things can happen. You know, this is what Nehemiah has to model himself. Now, that curious phrase where he said, I'd not been sad in the king's presence before, what's all that about? Well, we know from history that the Persian Empire was notoriously unstable, threat and counter-threat against the king. And so the king created his presence to be this kind of artificially happy environment where any display of sadness or displeasure was seen as a threat on the king's life. It was seen as a way of saying, I don't think you're a very good king, kingy. I don't think you're kinging very well indeed. I want a new king doing the kinging thing. It was punishable by death. That's why Nehemiah says, not I was afraid, not I was much afraid, but I was very much afraid. You know, Nehemiah has a little bit more than one red paperclip. He's got a job with money, comfort, influence. Yet nonetheless, he's asking the question, hey, I'm a bit further up the scale, on the trade scale, to my dreams coming true. But he's still asking the question, how can I follow God effectively here? And he lays it all on the line. He puts his life at risk to take one step further up the staircase. And maybe there are people here thinking, well, I'm not sure I've got much to give at all. Just got a teeny tiny paperclip. Give what you've got. Maybe God will reward you with a pen shaped like a fish. But maybe you've got a lot more influence and responsibility. And for you, the cost is much higher right now. Now, I pray that you see all your wildest dreams come true as you be faithful with what God has given you right now. And I'd like to encourage each of you, really simple I know, just to take that paperclip and that mustard seed away. Put it on your bedside table. Put it on your desk at work. And every day over this next academic year, ask yourself, what can I do with what I've been given right now? How can I be faithful with what I've got? How can I take one step closer to being a better disciple of Jesus? And maybe, who knows what will happen in the future? But I want to warn you this request, take another step up the staircase, it comes at a cost. You see, Nehemiah was calling the people to incredibly hard work. If you want to trade a paperclip for a house, there are a whole lot of trades along the way. Now, Nehemiah models this. We're told in chapter 1, when he hears the news about Jerusalem, it's the month of Kislev. Chapter 2, verse 1, when he goes to Artaxerxes, it's the month of Nisan. That's 4 months. And we're told in chapter 1, he prayed day and night during that time. I think that's very probably a turn of phrase. And he didn't pray all day and all night, partly because he had to sleep, partly because he had a very important job to do, and partly because when you read his dialogue with King Artaxerxes, every question that's asked of him, how long will it take? What do you need? What else can I do for you? He can fire off the answers straight away. Nehemiah hasn't sat back thinking, oh God, okay, would you deal with that problem out there? He's given himself to planning and preparation. He's a man of action. And not only that, but when finally he gets a yes from Artaxerxes, the journey from Persia to Jerusalem was not an easy one. Over 800 miles, which will take over 4 months at that point in history. 4 months of intense planning and preparation and prayer. And 4 months of a dangerous and arduous journey before a single brick has been laid on another. Nehemiah is a man who works hard. And not only that, but he's calling the people to hard work as well. You know, if the people in Jerusalem, poor as they are going to give themselves to building the walls of Jerusalem, they're going to have to sacrifice some of their own work. It will cost them financially and economically. They may have less food to put on the table as a result. And when we read 3 weeks' time, we'll find out that's exactly what happened. These are guys that are called to hard work if they want to see all their dreams come true. If we are going to live out our corporate calling to bless and serve this city, we are going to have to work hard. For some of us, that might involve getting up early, like the guys running the cafe in the Isle of Dogs, or the guys who get up early every Saturday to run food bank. For others, it might involve staying up late, like the guys helping at the night shelter in Tower Hamlets. For others, it might involve getting up early and staying up late, because that's the nature of the profession that you want to see change and prosper and flourish in this city. If you're going to trade a red paperclip for a house, there's a whole lot of hard work in between. You know, in many ways, building and shaping a church, seeing communities and cities change, is not that dissimilar, I don't think, from raising children. Those of you who know me know I've got 2 children, Brody, who's 2.5, Mia, there she is, coming up to her first birthday next week. She is not that cute, let me tell you. She is still yet to sleep through the night. She is killing me. She's killing me, as cute as she may seem. Let me tell you, it has not been easy. Every single night, having to wake up Joy to tell her to go and deal with it is really tough. It's cost us physically. It's cost us emotionally. It's cost us mentally. I know you know this. When I see her chubby little cheeks, and a cute little smile, I think, oh, that's why it's worth it. That's why I do it. That's why I pay the price. You know, building a church is like that. You'll invest in people who leave. You'll start a project that completely fails. You'll try and lead and people won't want to follow you. Happens to Dave all the time, let me tell you. But I promise you this. There will likewise be moments where you say, oh, that's why I do it. When that person's life has changed. When that project has been finally established. Took us ages to get that football project going, by the way. Food bank as well. When that community is different because a group of disciples are asking the question, how can I see this community change? You know, it's going to be blood, sweat and tears to see this city and the communities within it flourish. But there'll be moments where we say, oh, that's why I do it. If I can say this very, very carefully, the future fruitfulness of this church does not rest on the shoulders of the leaders. Whatever this church goes on to do does not rest on the leadership of this church. It rests on the shoulders of everyone. If I take Moses for an example, most of us know the story of Moses. I mean, what a guy. What a guy. Led the people out of slavery, did amazing miracles in front of Pharaoh, spoke to God face to face, we're told in Exodus 33, and yet was described as the most humble man on the face of the earth. And yet, in his leadership, he led God's people in a circle around a desert for 40 years until they all died. Why? Nothing to do with Moses. It's because of the people who grumbled, who complained, who hankered after an easier life. God protect us from that. God protect us from that. You know, if you walk into a city with broken down walls, you can have one of two attitudes. The first is, oh, broken down walls, that's a bit rubbish. Let's find a different city. Or you can say, oh, broken down walls, let's build them up again. Let's make a difference here. I want to speak to myself saying, oh, may I have the latter attitude rather than the former. So God sees my heart, that even when it's tough, I live with the right attitude in here. And the thing that struck me most from the passage we read in chapter 2, thing that just lived with me more than anything else, is you look at the exchange between Nehemiah and Artaxerxes. I mean, he gets a bit cheeky, doesn't he? He says, oh, can I have safe passage, please? I need letters for that. I need timber for the walls. And I'm going to need at least 8 months off work. 4 months there, 4 months back. That's at least 8 months. 8 months off work. Imagine doing that. There's one thing, though, that he does not ask for. And that's people to do the job for him. I found that amazing. I mean, you saw the map earlier, the scope of the Persian Empire. It's not a problem for Nehemiah to say, oh, Artaxerxes, give me 100 people, please, so we can, build the walls up. Get it done much quicker. I'll be back quicker. You don't hear Artaxerxes saying, yeah, have 500 people. In fact, you stay here, Nehemiah, where it's comfortable. They'll do all the hard work for you. Nehemiah doesn't ask for any of that. Why? Here's what I think. I think Nehemiah knows that it is part of the inheritance of God's people to be involved in building something great. Yes, it involves blood, sweat and tears. And for these guys in Jerusalem comes at a massive cost, given where they're at economically. And yet Nehemiah knows it's God's gift to them to get to the point where one day in the future, for all the pain and for all the hard work, they can look back and say, wow, we got to do that. God's gift to us, if we want it, is hard work to be involved in building something great. And for me, I just find it astounding. The people in this church that go to their bosses and say, can I do 4 days a week so I can give myself to this particular calling I've got here? People who are upping sticks and moving to a different part of London because they want to see flourishing in one particular community they feel passionate about. The hours that people give each Sunday to things like Food Bank, running church. I think people like Pete Keane and Tim Frisbee at Food Bank, Sharon Mukungo on the pastoral side, Verena Byrne, Phil White on kids work. I think of Thomas Mesfin, Keong before him on production. I think I could name dozens alongside them. You need to know that when we look at your lives, it is like we see an army of disciples emerging. We want to thank you for your hard work and perseverance. And I hope the work remains a joy, even if it's not always rewarding as it otherwise might be. And so we simply want to ask you, would you come and help us build something here? Would you help us build walls here? Would you join us? One final illustration before we close. It's actually one of Aesop's fables. I need some volunteers on stage. Joel Kendall, you can atone from this morning. Johnny Elwin, you'll do. Simon Froley, you'll do. To the front, please, gentlemen. These guys aren't prepared for this. It's a bit cheesy, but take a bamboo cane each. Okay, now remember the picture, Jerusalem, a weak, pathetic, fragile people. I give you them, ladies and gents. Now, here's your task. You might want to space out. I'm going to count down from 3. And on 3, the first person who snaps their cane in 2 is going to win a special Andy prize, okay? Ready? 3, 2. Are you ready, Johnny? You seem very, very casual. Okay, right, okay. 3, 2, 1, go. Froley wins by, oh my, well done, Joel. That's pretty pathetic. Joel, Johnny, you can sit down, weaklings. Simon Froley, your prize is an Andy Tilsley t-shirt with an upturned collar. It has been worn before and does need a wash, but there you go. And you get the chance to play for a bonus prize. If you can break those in half, you get Andy's special bonus prize, okay? 3, 2, 1, go. Come on, put some effort in. So sad as well, because if you'd done it, you could have won Dave Stroud's laptop. Oh, such a shame. Round of applause for Simon Froley, please. Now, here's what Aesop's fable says. He says this: my sons, if you are of one mind and unite to assist each other, you will be as this bundle, uninjured by all the attempts of your enemies. But if you are divided among yourselves, you will be broken as these sticks. Nehemiah knew there was great power in a weak group of people coming together to do something great. It wasn't Nehemiah that built the walls of Jerusalem, a people did it. Let's build something together here, where communities change, where disciples are made, and where this city flourishes as a result. Come and build with us. Why don't we stand? Maybe the band want to come up.